Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Patrick Leon, and I'm with Accelerated Information Systems. We're very excited to present today's webinar, Reimagining the Student Experience with eForms and Automation, which is a very insightful exploration of Bergen Community College's award-winning digital transformation story. I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce our speakers, and then we'll get started with the presentation. Ron, if you could please advance the slide. Our speakers today are Ron Spaide, Bergen Community College's Chief Information Officer, and Nishika Gupta, Bergen's Managing Director for Records and Information Management. I'd like to take a brief moment to thank them both for taking the time today to share their story and also to thank everyone watching. We hope you enjoy the presentation. Now I'll pass things over to Ron to get us started.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you joining our webinar here. We've been working with AIS for a number of years. This has been an extremely exciting time for us over the last couple of years. And you know, if anybody had a crystal ball, please let me know after this webinar. But this truly set us up for what we've all been experiencing since back in February, March of this year. And we'll dive a little bit into that. But we're going to cover the following. I'll tell you a little bit about Bergen, and we'll discuss some of the higher ed top trends that are going on. 5 IT practices. Sorry about that. Practices for transforming the student experience. We'll talk about the campus continuity in the heat in the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk about a couple of use cases and examples, some of the future enhancements that we're looking to do, and then we'll end with some question and answer. A little bit about Bergen Community College. We were founded in 1965. We're located up in northern New Jersey, in Paramus, New Jersey, about 25 minutes outside of New York City. We're a public 2-year community college, serving about 32,000 students in degree, continuing education, and adult education programs. We have a little bit over 1,400 full-time employees, faculty, staff, and we're the largest community college in New Jersey. And the other thing I like touting about Bergen is we're located right next to Ridgewood Country Club, where the BMW Championship, the PGA event, was held last year. Which was an exciting event for the area. So some of the top trends in college, in college itself, as we're all feeling the pains of, is the enrollment decline. You know, college enrollment in the United States has decreased for the 8th consecutive year, which is amazing that it's still trending in that direction, but it's still looking to continue trending in that direction for the next few years. The overall decline this past, I'm giving numbers, these numbers are from 2019, in spring compared to 2018 was a 1.7% decline, or roughly 300,000 students decline over that time period. The 4-year public institution saw a decline of just under 1%. So you know, these are pretty significant, and trending in that, they're continuing to trend in that direction is pretty astounding. Community colleges continued the enrollment slide. They had the largest, with a decline of almost 3.5%. And I know with the pandemic this year, those, you know, all college institutions are feeling some pain, but the community colleges in and of itself, where there was thought of an uptick in enrollment, actually was a downtick. So, you know, these trends continue, and it's about how we're going to battle those trends, what we're going to put in place, and we're going to discuss that today. The student demographics this slide here, I want to focus in the 58% here, right? So, you know, the data is looking at higher ed in general. But for 2-year colleges, the student profile could be even more drastic, where students are working multiple jobs, the raising families while at the same time trying to go to school. They don't have time to sit here and print off forms, sign them, bring them to campus, wait in a line, hand them over to the registrar of financial aid. And that was a lot of what we were dealing with for many years, and really put us on the path of automation and making these processes, these very manual, painful processes for our students, much more efficient. We're going to talk about that. This is a quote that I took out of the 2020 EDUCAUSE Top IT Issues: Applying User-Centered Design, Process Improvement, and System Reengineering to Reduce Redundant or Unnecessary Efforts and Improve End User Experiences. That is our primary focus and has been for the last year. It rolls into this year. It is truly about automation and drastically improving our manual processes. It's critical to continuing with improving the student service functions within the college. Our Reimagining Bergen, these were our strategic goals. So back in 2018, we developed a strategic plan that consisted of these 5 goals. It was all around reimagining the student experiences, human talent and internal culture, technology, financial resources, and relationships and partnerships. One of the major initiatives within these goals is an IT goal, which we had around transforming the student experience is the process, right? We want to transform registrar, financial aid, admissions, the enrollment management functions of that area. I'm going to hand it over right now to Nishika, and she's going to go into more detail around how we've been successful in doing that and moving the needle forward and improving those student experiences. So, Nishika?
Thank you, Ron. And I want to first thank Patrick and Christine and AIS for giving us the opportunity to share our story. So I'm going to continue where, not 2 years ago, 2017, we had a situation that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. We had a legacy system. It was approaching end of life. And we had a couple of options on our hand. We could just go by the new offering from the same vendor, but we decided to be bold and we decided to take, explore. It was an opportunity that's not always available to us. So we decided to embrace this opportunity and look at systems that would, reimagine our core systems, our services, and our processes. So we looked at what would bring about the best return on investment. And so instead of just replacing a records repository with a records repository, we decided to implement Laserfish. Laserfish, along with being obviously a great records repository, it brought to us an enterprise content management system. It had an amazing e-form user interface, a very robust workflow solution, and a document management solution. So what began as actually an effort to replace an outdated software is really been successfully transformed with faculty and staff gaining new digital tools and tremendously improving our student experience. Now, these numbers are a little old. Unfortunately, 2020 hasn't given us the luxury of updating these numbers yet. We've really been, like all of you, I'm pretty sure all of you are in the same boat. So these numbers are from 2019, but they will actually tell you. So when we put these numbers, we had the system basically for 2 years in place, less than 2 years in place. By then, we had implemented the system in, say, 17 areas, departments across the campus. We had 70 plus processes. And when we say submissions, we had 22,000 submissions. Some of these processes were simple, like, simply a student submitted a form and done, it's boom, it's done. But others were more complicated, multiple steps, multiple departments, multiple approvals, back and forth, resubmits, and all of that happening. And it's really, really helped us. Can I have the next? So this is just some of the areas where we've implemented Laserfish, and these are the numbers, submissions that we have. You obviously see financial aid was one of our biggest customers to start with, and they continue to be so today. But the other areas since then have picked up, and they're pretty much registration is really using, I mean, they have multiple processes that we work with them, testing services, student life, tutoring, pretty much every area of the college. And we started off with focus on student experience because, like Ron said, that was the part of a strategic goal. We wanted to focus there, and that's what you see in this chart. Is we've been focusing on areas that are student facing, and improve our student experience.
Yeah, just one thing to add in there, Nishika, is I would add in here, we just most recently in the beginning of October rolled out a new process for human resources where they had a significant challenge with us working completely remote. How do staff and faculty submit their health insurance registration forms, right? We all went through re-enrollment this year over the last month, and Nishika and her team were able to automate that process, leveraging the system to where the staff and faculty didn't have to come to campus to drop them off in a drop box at the front of campus. We automated the entire process where it was done remotely. So kudos to Nishika and her team.
Thank you.
And I think Aruj is on, so thanks, Aruj.
Yes, she is. I hope so. Okay, I think Ron, it's back to you.
So here we put a little section in here just to talk about what we've been through over the last 8 months, and really I'm sure this speaks to everybody. What Nishika and I were discussing the dates of when everything really happened, and it just seemed like it was a steamroller. It just was a big cement ball out of control. We're located just outside, like I mentioned. It says 45 minutes here. We're about I'll split the difference, 30 minutes outside of New York City. And we're in Bergen County, which was, if everybody remembers at the beginning of the outbreak, was the biggest hot spot in the state of New Jersey, and some would argue in the country. It was pretty bad. So we quickly, the executive team of the college made the decision that we were going to shut down and go completely remote. We made the decision on March 13th. The campus was completely closed, doors locked on March 18th. So you can imagine what had to happen in that 5-day span as far as making sure students, staff, and faculty not only had the technology in their hands to be able to move swiftly off campus, but how are we, from an administrative standpoint, going to continue to keep the campus running, continue to pay people, continue to make sure that students are able to register for our summer sessions. And as such, you can think about all those processes. And how are we going to give them access from a remote standpoint to do those processes, right? And train them up. All of that stuff we really need to work through in a very short period of time. And the team did an amazing job in making that happen. We were back online teaching remotely the last week of March, which was amazing. And kudos to the entire team. Nishika is going to go into a little bit more detail as to some specifics. So
like Ron said, specifics. March 15th, 2:34 p.m., we got an email from our president saying, and that was a Sunday afternoon, that effective Monday, the college will be remote, which gives us 8 hours. Employees were given 3 days to come collect their personal belongings, not to work, not to transition to remote work, but just to come to campus if absolutely essential to collect their personal belongings. So we set up a war room in Ron's office, the leadership team. Obviously, the first 2 weeks, it wasn't processor. It was more about getting hardware, laptops, devices, stuff like that, to make sure people had the essential technology to work from home. So the first 2 weeks went by that, and I'm pretty sure all of you have the same experience. April 1st is when we opened our fall registration, which was exactly 2 weeks from the time we went remote. And I think it was March 28th or 29th, I got a call from our Dean of Enrollment. How are we going to do in-person registration? And it was like, okay, how are we going to do? Because while we have self-service, which we promote for majority of our students to register, there are genuine circumstances in which a student cannot use self-service to register for courses. They used to come in person at our one-stop shop if they had holds of any kinds, if they had prereqs. There are a variety of circumstances. We literally had a week to design a process, and luckily, because we had Laserfish in our belt, we were able to design a process where students were able to complete what we have now come to use it as a remote registration form, which ties into the course offerings for the semester that they select. They attach any requisite documentation that they have to attach, depending on what the hold is, or if it's a prereq condition or whatever. It goes to our registration office that processes those on a first-come, first-served basis. Eventually, we will tie this process to colleague so that the registrations happen. Right now, they do happen manually. Registration goes in and manually. But these are the kind of things that we did not think of. They were not even on our radar. COVID brought all these processes up front that were not even on our radar. And again, because of the technology that we had, we were able to support it. I mean, I can only imagine what would have happened if we did not have this technology. So here, if you see at the next slide, I'm sure almost every higher ed institution received CARES money, which had to be distributed to the students. I noticed a lot of colleges did a web form and just put it on the website. We wanted to, because what happens is once a student submits a form, it's money, right? So then they start calling. Where is my, did you get my application? When do I get my money? Did you get my app? So we were trying to stay one step ahead. So what we did was we did a process through the Laserfish where they could submit and they could track their request. That ways we were already inundated. We did not want these additional thousands of calls coming in, following up our financial aid staff getting bombarded with these calls. So we put in processes where they can track the progress of the request. They can see when financial aid process the request. They can receive notifications of when they get the money. So we tried to stay as much ahead of the curve as we could.
So IT is a strategic partner. As everyone knows, IT's role has transformed over the last 5 to 7 to 10 years. Over the last few years, it's really evolved at Bergen, becoming more of a strategic partner to the institution. You know, strategic planning, process review and automation, policy creation, institutional budget planning, you know, those things that were, you know, why is IT involved in that stuff? They're just the keepers of the computers and network stuff. But we've become a strategic partner. We lead in collaboration and in bringing people together. We've been able to, you know, coordinate and bring departments, getting them together for projects to deliver, because they're not essentially IT projects. They are collegiate projects that require multiple departments to work on and deliver. I'm going to turn it over, leading collaboration in a large process, which Nishika is going to discuss right now in the next couple slides.
So as we talk about strategic partner, one of the examples that I want to go through is dual enrollment. I'm hoping most of you know what dual enrollment is. As Ron alluded to earlier, enrollments are on a decline, and almost every higher ed institution is looking towards high schools to increase that enrollment, right? That's an extra revenue that comes in. And dual enrollment is a process that not just involves the registration. At least at Bergen, it starts off in the academic area because the Dean of Dual Enrollment reports to the academic vice president. She's the one who maintains partnerships with all the high schools. Starts off in the academic area. Once those partnerships are developed, one of her team members then works with the high schools for all the nitty-gritties. And then it goes to the student services, which is the enrollment area, to actually register the students. And then finance gets involved because then payments have to be collected if they are free and reduced. So there's a number of, like Ron said, from a strategic level, this was one of the processes that involved a number of areas of the school. It was a great opportunity. It was one of the goals for the then president that we should develop. And that is what we decided to take on. Ron, can we have the next?
Yep.
So just to give you an idea of a then dual enrollment process, this is we were talking about 2 years ago, is our dual enrollment coordinator who reported to our dean of dual enrollment, once the contracts were signed with high schools, would get in her car, drive to the high schools in the area, take paper forms with her, and I am not even going to disclose the information that is on those paper forms. I think it gives me nightmares still. She would go collect from these thousands of students, get back on the road. Sometimes there is checks, credit card information, all of that, puts it in her passenger seat of her car and drives back to school, and comes back and gives it to our registration staff. So this next picture is the registration staff. Or on the next, yeah. So this is the registration staff trying to, it's like, what do you want me to do with these? And you can imagine these. I know my teenager doesn't know how to write. You know, these kids did not grow up learning how to write. So imagine the handwriting that comes through these forms. It's not always clear. The records have to be stored in Colleague, created in Colleague. Sometimes the address doesn't make sense. It does not match up. And there's a whole lot of back and forth that happens between the student services, the coordinator, and it's a nightmare of a process. So when they started talking about expanding dual enrollment, the first request that started coming in is we need more staff. And that was kind of like, no, this whole idea of expanding dual enrollment is because we want to expand, increase enrollment so that more revenues come. If we hire staff, that kind of washes it out. So IT was involved, and we used Laserfish to actually automate the process. What we did was we actually worked with all these areas to create a streamlined online experience for the student. So the students were given a platform to create an account. They were entering their information online. They were going to create, that process would create records. They would select the courses which were pre-approved for dual enrollment for their particular school. They would submit it, it would go to their counselor for approval, and then it would come to us and we would register them. So it completely eliminated the need for this paper with highly confidential information floating around from one office to other. At any given point, we knew exactly where we were in the process. We could track the student's request. We could track it, whether the student was registered, whether the student was at the pending payment stage, whether the student was at an approval stage. So there was the entire process was tracked, and it completely eliminated the need. In fact, the dual enrollment coordinator we had at one point we were like, okay, we can give her additional responsibilities now because we have taken away so much of the headache work that she had to deal with. And she could actually do some work where she would be advising students or counseling students on what courses they should be, some value add work to the college. So this is just an example of a form, what it looked like. A student would sign in, it would auto-populate their information, their address. If we go to the next one, this is where they would select what school they are in. It pops up what courses are tied to that school. It gives them their fee schedule. And I don't even expect you to read this entire process, but this is basically what I just talked about. This is what the back end looks like. This is I don't know if some of your attendees are designers or developers, and this is the back end, what the back end looks like in Laserfish for designing a process.
So scaling, this is, Nishika touched on a couple points that I want to bring up here. How do we make ourselves from an IT perspective more efficient and effective? Right? These were questions, a question that I ask my team all the time. With enrollment declining year over year, and I've said that it's going to continue, not replacing retiring staff and both faculty and department staff is something that's been going on over the last few years and probably will continue. How do we provide the same level of service or better, right? looking at these critical areas and answering those questions. We're assessing business process across departments, starting with critical areas, right? We've talked a little bit about financial aid, and we talked a little bit about admissions, the process that Nishika just talked about. We are expanding that across the college. These processes have been in place, these manual processes, for many, many, many years, right? We have people at the college who've been there for many years and who are just tied to these processes. So, if you can imagine, it's not just, showing people saying, hey, here's what we're going to do, but it's a partnership, right? We want to bring them along and show them where we can make efficiencies, and at the same time, be able to say, hey, you know what? You're more valuable speaking with students and guiding them and helping them understand what courses they need to take for what program. Just an example, right? It's going to significantly increase the efficiencies across campus, right? It's a benefit. It's going to help the students to help them become more efficient themselves and to get off the paper, right? They're used to using the computers now. Putting these processes and automating them, that is a big step forward for us and continues to be. Nishika is going to walk us through how we've been able to do some of this at Bergen right now.
Thank you, Ron. So one of the downsides of having a successful implementation is the onslaught of requests that follow. It is very easy to get inundated by requests and forget the big picture. But essentially, all requests that come in, and this is the conversation that me and Ron have had multiple times every time I ask him for more people on my team, is we categorize these requests based on the strategic goals they serve, and we prioritize them accordingly. At Bergen, we do that in 4 categories. Does a request serve student retention, or does it help increase student retention? Is there a return on investment if we automate this process? Is this significantly improving our student experience? And then the 4th one is something that's a necessary evil that we have to deal with, is data privacy security. We don't like to, but it's compliance. We have to, so we have to keep that in mind.
It's the world we live in.
It's the world we live in. Some projects might fall into multiple categories, right? So there might be projects that bring significant ROI, but also improve the security of data collected. There might be projects that improve experience, but also lead to student, because experience leads to student retention. Student enjoys being part of the community. They enjoy the service that they receive, and so they want to be here longer, right? So it's important that a prioritization exercise happen every so often. So we want to make sure that the IT resources are best being utilized. We do not want to be spending resources on stuff that has little of no value. It has a goodwill feeling, but of no real value to the school. So one of the examples that the next slide that we focus on is the testing waiver process. So at a community college, and I think 4-year colleges, every new student that comes in is required to take a placement test that determines what level of math or English they will be placed in. So if there are thousands of students that come in, they have to take a placement test. However, they can be waived from a placement test if they have decent SAT scores. There's multiples of criteria that can waive them off the placement test. Prior to our Laserfish implementation, starting in April, which is when we open for registration up till August, our testing center, outside a testing center, there would be long lines of students holding this paper waiver form, waiting to get their turn at the window to submit a waiver form so that they can be waived off from the placement test. And if this documentation was not found to be sufficient, they had to come back with the requisite documentation that was required. This was the first experience these students were having with our college. And that is not what we want to give them, right? We want to give them the best experience as they start interacting with it. And this was obviously not a very good experience. So what we did was, so this was one process that floated right at the top of our priority list when we started prioritizing our projects. We're like, this is going to improve student experience if we automate this. Very simple process. Design an online process for them to select, fill out a form, select the reason for their waiver. Depending on what they select, give them the instructions on what supporting documentations they need to attach. They attach it, They submit it to our testing office. Our testing office now reviews it. Now, instead of a front office operation, it has become a back office operation where they will review these requests. If they feel the documentation is not appropriate, they have a provision in there to ask for a resubmit. They can put comments in there. The students can see those comments, then upload whatever is missing or correct, and then resubmit it. And there's a whole tracking process, right? So now these students don't have to stand hours in long lines. It literally was hours at one point of time. And they just have to, and these students are used to this, right? They are the most computer savvy students out there. They are used to filling out forms. They are used to taking pictures with their phone and uploading stuff. So it was very natural for them, and it definitely organized our process. It gave the testing team also, it organized our testing department too, because everybody knew the workload could be evenly distributed, and it really made life simple. Okay, another enterprise practice that we focused our guns on was data security. Data security has been at the top issue in EDUCAUSE if you read about it. I know we've heard from a lot of CIOs that is one thing that keeps them up at night is data security. In higher ed, we work with a lot of confidential information. We do with student records, medical records, financial records, employee records, and as owners of data, we are expected to know what we're doing, and we need to make sure that we hold this data, we take good care of this data. And not just that, there are multiple regulations. I'm not going to go through each, but there's FERPA, there's HIPAA, there's Gramm-Leach, and the latest one is GDPR, which was a privacy regulation that came out of Europe that dictated how we do it. But even with all these regulations, what we see in a typical office in student services is that there is a lot of paper. Now, if you look at this next picture, actually, I think it was a previous picture. Yeah. Come to mind, there are a couple of things that comes to mind, right? I don't know, if as a parent, if I'm going to a college and this is what the desk looks like, I won't be comfortable handing over my kids' paperwork to this person, right? I don't even know if it's going to stay there, it's going to get lost, it's going to go throw it in the garbage. What happens? So customer service is very important. Employee productivity. How productive do you really think the employee is going to be if it has a desk like this? I mean, they're never going to find anything what they're looking for. Bad data. If all of these papers have to make their way into some sort of a system, the accuracy of the data. I mean, I know we come across all the time in colleague where there's bad data. Data has been entered, and that creates a whole different set of headaches, right? The bad data, because now we have to, and then we have to go in and correct that data and all of that. So that is another problem. And then last but not the least is data security. I mean, we went over all the regulations. We are required to comply with them. So this desk that the previous picture is not going to get a passing grade from the auditor who's trying to assess the institution's compliance with these regulations. It's going to be a security night. So this is one way to clean a desk. We could do this. We could just push all the paper down and we could get going, right? We have a clean desk. That's what we asked for. Well, unfortunately, this is not going to pass the smell test. So what we do is we went the path of automation. At Bergen, in the couple of years that we've had Laserfish, we've literally eliminated, I would say, 60 to 70% of the paper forms that are submitted by the student. Our financial aid office is completely online, except for one or two instances where they have to have a notarized form or need to sign a form in the presence of somebody. Other than that, the entire process is online. The entire process is tracked. Documents are only shared with staff. So this is a repository. Security is built in. We have audit trails built in. If you don't have access to see a folder, you don't see a folder. You can give access to subfolders and stuff like that. So there's a lot of security and accountability that comes in when we implement a system like this, and it takes us much closer to compliance, which we are required to do. And this is what the desk will eventually look like. It doesn't just yet look like this, just yet. It doesn't yet. We'll get there. Okay, so, and then the last aspect that we looked at was integration. As we were looking for solutions, one of the main requirements we had was the ability for the system to integrate. We have had, what I'm so sure is most of you know, is solutions which were implemented, but integrating them was a nightmare. They were perfect, great solutions by themselves, but when you ask those systems to talk to each other, it was just a nightmare. And it often led to breakdown in processes. So when we implemented Laserfish, our goal was to make sure that this experience was as easy for our student. We created integration between Laserfish and colleagues. So all of our forms, in fact, not most, all of our forms, students never have to fill out their name, address, phone number, because we have that information. Why should we ask a student to complete something that we already have? So the moment they log in, based on their login, we know who they are, and their information is automatically populated. This kind of, it eliminates bad data, because if we ask them to type in, there is a big chance that they would be typing in wrong address, wrong name of the spelling, stuff like that, and we will get bad data. We update the data if needed, right? We don't, and there are processes for it. We don't just update it because they put in a new address. There are processes for this. We remove silos. Our visiting students waiver process is an example where we seamlessly, it starts off from Hobson's, which is our CRM, where they apply, our visiting students apply. Then if they have a prerequisite, they bring their transcripts or a letter from this college. We waive their prereq in colleague using Laserfish. Laserfish and colleague talk to each other. So through Laserfish, they submit their prereqs in colleague. It is waived, which allows them in self-service to register. So it's one of those ideal seamless processes where we're not telling the system now to apply, go here, now to do this, go here, now to do this, go here. We are giving them a seamless interface. And it all then results in a beautiful student experience. The other integrations that we've done is we've integrated with our ticketing system. So IT forms, for example, we used to have 5 different forms for 5 different, if you need a mailbox, fill this form. If you need access to a drive, fill this form. If you need this, so we've kind of combined all of that. Our colleague access request, which, and it has not only just automated, it has improved processes. So our colleague access request, which in the past was all you needed was a VP signature. And with the busy life that the VPs deal, they didn't always read what they were signing off on, right? And I don't blame them, but they were just because they, so now with this process, when we automated this process, we looked at it and we said, this is not right. If somebody needs access to POs, then it should go to the director of purchasing. She should be the one to be able to approve that request. If somebody is asking for access to student data in colleague, then it should go to the registrar. If somebody is asking access to employee data, then it should go to HR. So we were able to build those things into our process, you know, not just automating it, but improving it as we go ahead. And one of the last integrations is connector. We haven't yet gotten there, but we will. And this is just a screenshot. So, no, go ahead. This is just a screenshot of what a backend integration looks like. You know, on one side is the Laserfish form, and the other side is the colleague data.
Great. Thanks, Nishika. Measuring success. How we've measured success thus far. So we've been with Laserfish about 2 years. You know, there's some obviously major things that jump out, right? We can measure, you know, how much time saved by automating paper processes into, you know, electronic forms and you know, the electronic collection of data. You know, we can take that time and multiply it out by, you know, estimating our, you know, salary costs, right? In the beginning of this, we had showed a slide where we were roughly 2,700 hours, 2,800 hours. We've easily doubled that this year, and then some. And we've saved areas like financial aid and enrollment management areas, specifically full-time resources, right? So, and have been able to leverage the resources that they have in more students-facing functions, as I mentioned earlier. The demand from other areas coming to Nishika's team and saying, hey, we need your help with these. You know, that is a measurement, right? She's got a project list longer than my arm. She mentioned the priorities around that, but you know, we do have KPIs and how we're measuring the success and the reinvestment that we continue to make in this solution. You know, I talked about the hours saved. These are from FY19. We're roughly 2,800 hours. We are probably around I would estimate it around 5,000 to 6,000 hours through FY20. These are future enhancements we've talked about. We're looking at leveraging more analytics and reporting. We're talking about and looking at building API level integrations more with Colleague. We're looking to enable single sign-on. Our DocuSign integration is moving along, and then ultimately we're looking to migrate to the cloud version of Laserfish, and it's one of the last on-prem systems that we have on campus. I want to end the presentation with just a couple quotes from Helmut Schmidt. The biggest room in the world is the room for improvement, and we consistently see those areas of improvement as we go down this path of automation and process automation. And then every once in a while, Dean Kamen, the guy who invented the Segway, I love this guy. Every once in a while, a new technology and an old problem, a big idea turn into an innovation. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Nishika, great job. And thank Patrick, you. I'll turn it back over to you for any questions that we can answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Ron and Nishika. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your story. And we're going to have a few minutes here just for questions and answers. I do want to let everyone know that we're recording this presentation, but we're going to stop the recording now. So none of the questions will be included in the recording. But again, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Nishika. And thank you, everyone, for attending today and watching the presentation. We'll stick around for a few minutes for some questions and answers.